Hi there, this is Jay Holston with Moving the Needle, and I'm really pleased to be here today with Marc Emmer. And Marc spoke with my Vistage group a couple weeks ago. We really hit it off, and my group got tremendous value. It was one of those great sessions where everybody rated the session as all fives, and so I circled back with Marc and just said, hey, can we get a chance to kind of chat? I'd love to have an open question and answer conversation, just help others learn a little bit more about his viewpoints on strategy. Super, super qualified guy. I mean, Marc is a Vistage speaker, I think over 400 keynote speeches. He's a contributor with both Inc. and Forbes, and has a book called Momentum, How Companies Decide What to Do Next. And so very distinguished. And Marc, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
Yeah, you're too kind, Jay. And I think probably I'm here in Los Angeles where the weather is very nice today. I think probably a little better than it is in Dallas at the moment.
It is. And what's so sad is we're going to have the eclipse here on Monday. And damn if it's not supposed to be cloudy. So people from all over the country are traveling to Dallas, which is not, a marquee destination, I don't think, for many tourists, and for this event. And then we're going to give them some rain and some clouds. So that's unfortunate. But just as I kind of mentioned in the intro, I have a Vistage group. We have 16 members, very diversified group of CEOs, and we get together once a month. And one of the things we like to do is we like to have speakers join us and really kind of help us figure out where to lift our game. And one of the things that was really exciting about having Marc come and talk to us is that we all talk about strategy, but I think it's kind of one of those areas that is really hard to get your arms around. I think a lot of people look at kind of the planning exercise that they do for their business planning and kind of think that is strategy. But one of the things I think that Marc and I'll be getting into in our conversation today is most of the thoughts we do are really on the cost side of things that we control, that, we can control, if we're going to, invest money in this or invest money in that. But really, one of the things that's very difficult about strategy is you're trying to work with customers and you don't have control over your customers, and you're trying to inspire them to want to work with you. And so when you're making those investments in those areas, there's some risk and there's some unknown, and it's a less comfortable feeling. And so, Marc, I think you'll put it into better words than I, but maybe if you would kind of share as you come in and help people in the journey to kind of get comfortable with what strategy is and help manage their expectations for the journey that you're going to take them through. What have you kind of share with us some of your lessons learned, please?
Sure. Well, yeah, I would even expand upon your comment. So it's not only that the customers are unpredictable, but when you're running a company, you're working in a marketplace that's often very dynamic and unpredictable. And we're always working in a series of cycles, right? There's a political cycle, there's a monetary cycle, there's an economic cycle. And so I think if you want to do strategy well, a lot of it is having an awareness of what's happening outside your four walls. And when companies don't do strategy well, it's because they become very internally focused and they're really thinking about their core structure and their capabilities. And I think it's great to have those conversations, but you need to also be weighing them against the market opportunities that you're trying to pursue.
Yeah. And so can we go down kind of like a next layer of detail? Like what do you do to kind of take somebody who knows that this is an area where they need to make an investment of time to really kind of think about their strategy, but they really don't know what they don't know? What are kind of the first steps to get started?
Right. Well, I think it's important to think of strategy as a set of inputs and outputs, right? So your outputs are highly reliant on the work that you're willing to do up front, right? So when we work with a client, we usually think of it as kind of three phases, right? So there is a phase where you're doing pre-work and research. You're doing your competitive analysis, you're doing your market analysis, maybe it's voice of the customer or voice of the employees. So you're gathering data so you can put yourselves in a position to make fact-based decisions. Mm-hmm. So I think that, most people think of strategy as like a meeting, and what it really is it's a set of inputs, and you gather those inputs in advance. Then you have the strategy meeting, and then you have an execution phase, right? So you really need to think about strategy like it's a cycle and not an event. So I think the companies that do it really well, they're intentional. They calendar the whole year out. These are all the series of meetings that we need to have. This is all the information we need to gather before we meet. These are the things that we need to do, after we've had our strategy meeting, so that you have the best chance of achieving the desired result.
One of the things that I really like about us talking after you've spoken with the group is I've had the benefit of being through your presentation. And one of the things that, as you were speaking just now, that I was starting to think about was kind of how you broke it apart as the four elements of any strategic plan. Would you mind kind of sharing with folks what your experience is on those four elements?
Sure. So, and we've already addressed this to some extent, but there's four things that you always want to have in a strategic plan. You want to have a clarity on what markets you want to address. So it's like, where will we win?
Mhm.
And it's super interesting, Jay, because business owners will tell me they have the answer to that question, but when I pull back the kimono in a lot of organizations, there is just not clarity on the disparate segments that the client is, that the company is trying to address. So where will we win? Then how will we win is your playbook, right? It's the one thing you did in the meeting, Jay, which was great, was you pulled up a video by Roger Martin where he talks about strategy as it's a theory, right? It's how will we create competitive advantage in a marketplace through some unique capability or product, or technology or whatever. Then you need to have the capabilities and capacity to win. So that's matching your internal people, processes, and technology with the market opportunities that you've identified. And then finally, you have to have the processes and systems needed to execute well. So I think of strategy as a balance between looking outside and also looking inside.
And so you, as you know, with Vistage groups, kind of the sweet spot in Vistage is companies that are, let's say, larger than 5 million and less than 50 million. And and within that group, let's think of a company. Let's say they provide a professional service, and kind of in their they've recognized that what they do is a bit of a commodity. Let's say it's professional service implementing an application like NetSuite or something. And great number of companies do that. It's really hard to differentiate yourself in that space. And so they come back and say, okay, where will we win? Obviously, we're NetSuite. How are we going to win? We're going to create this great customer portal that's going to differentiate our managed service from everybody else. But they don't have it yet. And so they figured out their hypothesis of what's going to differentiate them. If you had a company like that, and they don't yet have the system, how do you kind of help them through that awkward point of they have a hypothesis of what they need to do? Truly, it's a guess. You could still build it, and they may not come.
Right.
How do you help people? Because that's really where what I'm seeing with my membership is they're ready for the next level. They're a little bit starved in terms of capital to get there, but and so that's where I struggle with helping them. And so in that use case that I just gave you, what would you recommend?
Well, I first would like to speak to the first part of your question about company size, because I think it really does make a difference if you have 5 people or 50 people or 500 people,
Mhm.
right? Because the larger private organizations, they have teams of people who can work on things for which you may derive no profit for 2 or 3
Mhm.
years, right? You
Yeah.
might have a product manager or that kind of role.
Mhm.
In smaller entrepreneurial companies, everyone's a generalist, right? And you don't have a lot of time. So what I always advocate for is, if you're a smaller private company, just carve out time every month for your innovation meetings, your strategy meetings. So you may not have dedicated people in that role, but you can find the time with a small team to think out into the future.
That's
I
great.
think even in the case, and you know what's funny, Jay, is every company will tell you they have price pressure. Every company will tell you that they're in a commoditized industry. It's just everything's relative. I don't consider professional services to be as commoditized as some other things. But so if it were a NetSuite suite provider, for example, one of the questions I'd be asking is, are you focusing on particular market verticals? Because if you became the go-to NetSuite implementer for construction, even just within the Vistage community, there would be thousands of potential clients for that slice of that market vertical. And then you start to use that language and you start to have signature clients who are references, and you have referral sources because you're known as being the expert in that area. And maybe you start going to those trade shows and you start mining clients LinkedIn that are in construction who might be at the right company size for a NetSuite implementation. So I think one of the things that I'm a real advocate for, as I'm sure was made clear in the Vistage talk, is we believe in specialization. And if you're trying to fight off commoditization, then there is a real argument for finding ways to specialize.
You had several good points there, and I really do appreciate you revisiting the one about the size of the company. I remember you had kind of a slide that really spoke to that about, okay, if I'm a startup, here's how I think about strategy. If I'm early stage, if I'm mid market, if I'm enterprise, where you kind of helped kind of think it through, and that's a huge nugget about just carve out some time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and
Right.
so but get started. Don't lament the fact that you're small. Invest some time to start putting things together, and the idea around segmentation around industry and market. I mean, that's very pragmatic. That's a lot easier than trying to say, okay, I'm going to build this portal that I'm not sure at the end of the day that'll win me over the customers. But so just kind of having that segmentation, that is a really a good idea. Do you have anything to kind of add to that is helpful for companies to kind of think about, what is an easy kind of put my toes in the water way to get started with strategy?
Well, another thing we talked about in some depth, which I'm an advocate for, is, let's say you are a smaller private company, let's say in that $5 to $20 million revenue range. I think a fatal trap that a lot of companies fall into is they think they're supposed to go after the largest addressable market. And I would suggest it's actually the reverse, right? If you are resource constrained, you only have so many salespeople and you can only execute so many projects at a time. Or maybe if you're in production, you can only produce so much. Aren't you better served going after a marketplace where you're not competing against public competition, and perhaps is underserved by the marketplace, and creating some nuanced kind of offers that you can sell in a way where you're not going to have so much margin compression and price commoditization?
And I think I recall you calling that the serviceable obtainable market. And
Right. Well, there is a lot of confusion about market sizing. So one of my slides explains the TAM, SAM, and SOM, right? That's your total addressable market. That's your service obtainable market. Um, I'm sorry, service obtainable market being the SOM, but that's just fancy terminology for, you want to chunk your market down
Mhm.
and you want to try to find a niche where you can try to achieve market leadership. And what happens is that people kind of get stuck trying to evaluate the size of the big market, even though that might not be where they can create some form of competitive advantage.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one other thing that and I think that's very helpful, trying to figure out your niche, and also another thing that we spoke about that I thought was a very good strategy, and if you wouldn't mind sharing with the folks that are watching this video, was around good, better, best.
Right. Well, I think it's important to share the caveat that good, better, best doesn't work for everyone. But I think there is a lot to learn from the pricing strategy that has certainly proliferated through our economy. And so, what I was kind of explaining, and I think this applies both to B2B and B2C, by the way, is that a lot of premium providers, I'm sorry, a lot of providers have come up with a premium product for purposes of repositioning the entire product portfolio. Because when you offer good, better, best, what happens is the law of threes, people disproportionately buy the middle price product
Mhm.
around 80% of the time. So if you have a premium product, you might not even sell much, but by offering it, it creates an anchor price for the client where they perceive the middle priced product perhaps be more valuable. So all you have to do is look at basically any software product on the market today, and they almost always price that way, and they provide that comparison, which actually allows for a more seamless decision on the part of the buyer.
I I certainly fall for that. And it invariably the middle option works, and it's very interesting for you to quantify it. I had no idea that 80% of the time people select the middle option. That's that's uh that's amazing. And so I think with that knowledge, there's a lot of things that you can kind of tweak in terms of really to kind of figure out the sweet spot and how to drive that behavior. So that's a helpful insight for sure. And as you've been talking with folks, I mean, something that's very timely that everybody's talking about these days is artificial intelligence. And I think there's, a chat GBT. We have examples of how it can bring productivity. But what is your observation of the impact of artificial intelligence on strategy?
Well, that's a great question. And I think productivity is certainly one outcome of artificial intelligence and machine learning, but I actually feel like perhaps we should be aiming higher than that. But the problem, Jay, and I'm certain that you are feeling this because of the nature of the people you work with all the time, is that it seems like all these business owners and professional business people, they expect artificial intelligence to be some kind of magic bullet where they'll roll out of bed and find some free application on the internet that they'll deploy tomorrow and is free and will miraculously change their business overnight. And that is just an unreasonable expectation. I mean, how many things in your business career have you seen that work that way? What I would suggest is if you really want to unleash the transformative power of AI, because AI has the opportunity, provides us the opportunity to completely change how we do business in a way which is much more meaningful, that's going to require time and investment. And so, I'll tell you what I think the formula is, but there's no magic bullets here. This is probably at least the 2 or 3 year kind of process, if not much longer than that. But I think where you start is by setting a foundation where you're going to have a digital transformation strategy as an undercurrent in your business strategy. So maybe you're using your 2024 planning cycle as a time to really think about how can we leverage digital transformation with AI being a subset of that. Part of that is going to be creating the right digital team. I mean, one of the keys to leveraging artificial intelligence is by having kind of APIs that work together. And very often they're going to sit on what used to be called the data warehouse. And so companies are employing roles like data scientists that you're not going to find in many small private companies because those people are the most in demand first skill set in our economy, and they are commanding salaries of $400,000 or $500,000 a year. So we're going to have to build out a team that looks very different than the team that we have today. Another thing that I think is really useful is maybe to identify some domains. So by a domain, I mean, think of a portion of your business that you could apply digital transformation to, as opposed to trying to boil the ocean and say, use chat GPT in every function in every way. And then once you've done that, There are many products on the market today that are take on the form of a workflow. So by I mean a workflow, I'm saying that there might be ways you can automate an entire function through a third-party provider. So a good example might be client onboarding or employee onboarding. I'm currently implementing a client onboarding utility in our firm, which is software as a service, right? I'm going to be paying a couple $100 a month to have access to this software that will automate something that used to be manual in a way that we can improve the client experience. And then finally, at some point, all the technologists are going to have to rework their technology stack, right? You're going to have a different internal technology infrastructure to support a business that's really going to leverage AI. So like I said, I know there's a lot to unpack there. But what I would suggest is we need to think about this in the long term and not just plug and play easy solutions.
Absolutely. And I think the onboarding is a perfect example. That's one that I can get my head around that would be perfect for this because there is decisions to be made. And there's certainly a lot of detail and stuff, and it can be automated. A great, I mean, call center is another example. Whereas, somebody can call in, but with that, you can use AI to do the scheduling, with a technician, and you can just automate a lot of things that used to be disparate workflow activities. They can be brought together, and so I can see it there. The just taking it, I guess, one step more into, I think what you were advocating was that digital transformation should be a part of the entity's strategy. So regardless of your size, even if you're on the smaller side, you should put on your thinking cap and really figure out how you can get some productivity. And is it still on productivity, or is there other things other than productivity that you see AI doing for companies?
Yeah, I think that, and again, it's hard to speak in absolute black and white terms here, right? Everything's relative. But I think for a lot of companies, AI will become more fundamentally part of the business strategy in terms of whom they're trying to serve and how they will serve them. Productivity is great, but if you eke out a 3% productivity gain and all your competitors eke out a 3% productivity gain, so what, right? That's not a path to competitive advantage. So I would actually be thinking in more holistic terms about the business, and would your business model change if you had certain advantages? I'll give you an example.
Please,
I think that a lot of clients today are expecting better analytics from the vendors to serve them. They want reporting. They want insight in those reports. And so a lot of your smaller private companies don't have great business analytics, and AI and machine learning is going to allow us to do that much more readily.
Okay. So I have a member that provides frac fluids for oil and gas completions. And so I think if I take what you just said and apply that, maybe an element of differentiation for themselves would be pulling in some kind of additional information that they can get back to their customer, who's the operator, that is greater feedback around the effectiveness of the service offering that they're providing. Something like that, where they can show analytically the impact that it's doing.
Yeah, well, so that's an amazing example that you offer, because I actually worked with a client in that business. So I've had a client that was in the pipeline consulting business, and their offer at the time was to provide advice to large pipeline operators on how to mitigate their risk. Because obviously, if you have a pipeline failure, that's a very costly problem, right? Yes. So, but what we kind of figured out was that consulting to that kind of client had some limitations. So what we built out was a software technology that helped the pipeline operators to analyze their risk. And so their business model actually transformed from a consultancy to more of a passive income stream software solution where they wrap the consulting around the software. So that actually would be a perfect example of how business models will shift as a result of having access to better data.
Absolutely. And also, you've obviously made a tremendous difference in the value of the company because you've been able to push more of the revenue from being project-based to recurring based. So
Yeah, 100%. And let's not minimize that because,
exactly.
a company that is let's say a professional services company in a space like that might sell it at 8 or 10 times, of course, depending on their size. But if that were a SaaS product, it's probably 20 or 30. So that's a completely different animal.
Yeah, it's more than getting two birds with one stone. It is they have an element of differentiation that serves them for building their business, but at some point when they exit the business, they will be rewarded. And so that's probably a fantastic example for us to end on because I think um, everybody that I work with, I mean, that's something that we talk about at least on a quarterly basis is if you have a project-based business, think out of the box. What can you do to try to bring recurring revenue? And then obviously once you've done that, um, divide your company so that you have a good understanding and good accounting around my recurring revenue versus my project-based accounting so that you can show that differentiation to a potential buyer.
I would also just add before we wrap, I'd say a very common trend today is that the product companies are trying to bundle services with product, and the service companies are trying to productize, right? So there is a lot of bundling going on in the market in a way to deliver more end-to-end solutions for clients because a lot of folks feel like that's how they deliver greater value.
So true. And I think you know this about me, but I founded a software company. And one of the things, a cruel lesson that I learned is people don't wake up in the morning saying, I want to buy software. People wake up in the morning wanting a result. They want a solution. And the software is a method towards that result or that solution. And so the more that you can do what you just said, which is the bundling of the services with to create that result, that is going to at least from my experience, going to be a winning strategy. Well, very good. Well, Mark, as always, I really appreciate your time. It was very nice to get a chance to chat with you and just kind of revisit some of the concepts that you shared with the group. As you know, at the end of it, we went around and everybody wrote down actionable things that they learned from you that they plan to apply. So at our next meeting, I'll be able to see how folks move forward on many of those things that they committed to because this is how we create value within our member companies is by bringing on excellent speakers like yourself that can really get people to think instead of working in their business, they can start to think about working on their business and start to think about things that can appreciably move the needle. And I think we've shared several very good ideas in this video, and I appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention if folks like this kind of content. I have a fair number of like how-to kind of videos on my YouTube channel, so there's certainly more there as well.
And do you need to say anything that makes it easier for them to find your YouTube channel?
Just if they go to YouTube and search Marc Emmer, they'll find it. That's Emmer. But thank you, Jay. Great to see you, and have a great year.
Okay, thank you. You
All
take
right.
care.
Take care.
Thanks. Goodbye.